Hi, everybody. My name's Sandy Wright, and this is Bandology's Culture Days panel on careers in music. Rockstar to librarian, what do you want to do? So today we've brought in three wonderful people to talk about their jobs in music, what they do, and sort of how they got there, the best parts of their job, what a typical day looks like, and anything you can possibly want to know. Thank you all so much for coming on. Could you guys introduce yourself? Let's start with Michael.
Sure. I'm Michael Yates. I teach with the Halton District School Board. I teach grades 6, 7, and 8 instrumental music. I went to Mohawk College for jazz drums, and I did a 3-year diploma there. And when I finished there, I was offered to go to McMaster University to finish my music degree. So I went and did that at McMaster. I then got a sort of a job with Hillfield Strathallan College, which is a private school in Hamilton, Ontario. And I spent a year and a half to 2 years there, both supplying and sort of in and out of their music department. And then I applied to Teachers College, and I went to Nipissing University for a specialty in music. And then I got hired right out of Teachers College to the Halton board, and went permanent shortly after that. Yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. I know a lot of people who went to Nipissing for Teachers College. It's a great place to be. It's beautiful. Yeah. It's beautiful up there. I wasn't there in the winter, but it was beautiful when I was there in the fall and spring. Shauna, what about you? Can you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Shauna Bates. I played trombone and a bit of piano. I studied at University of Western Ontario. I did my undergrad in music education, and then decided not to become a teacher, and instead opened a recording studio with the partner at the time. Ran that for 7 years, did some stage managing and audio teching across small theaters in Ontario. And then married my husband, and we own a music store and a couple of music schools in Etobicoke and in Oakville, Ontario. And yeah, that's what we do for a living.
Cool. That's super cool, especially the bit where it's like, I did a music ed degree and then didn't become a teacher. I think that's always interesting to see how people sort of like paths go. And we'll talk more about that. Ryan, tell us about yourself.
I went to Laurier for music and performance, which I actually now I'm also not doing performance, I'm teaching. So it's been fun. But I've played percussion, basically drum kit, in different styles and whatnot. Guitar, that's pretty much it for about 11 years or something. And now I'm just kind of teaching, doing some bandology stuff on the side, teaching at Burlington Teen Tour Band, and then I got some private students that I'm just doing every once in a while. So yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah, what exactly do you do at bandology? Can you tell us that?
Well, I do a couple different things. I'm currently doing a lot of workshop stuff. So I'm kind of doing a lot of reach out stuff to teachers in the HDSB board. So if you want to have a percussion ensemble or a drum line or any like kind of clinicians or workshops kind of come in, I'm more than happy to do that and help out with extracurricular stuff. And then during the summer, my role kind of switches over to camp. So I do a lot of directing of camp and making sure that stuff flows well.
Obviously, I work with Ryan. He's great at it. Cool. Thank you so much for telling us a bit about yourself. The thing that I kind of want to know, you all described a little bit of how you got into this career, like stage by stage, but what sort of drew you into being interested in that career? What was the thing that went, okay, yeah, I like this, and this is something that I think I will want to do? Or what sort of went, oh, I'm here. Here is good. This is something that I'm happy with, because sometimes you just fall into things. I know I fell into teaching piano. That is an instrument I didn't play for 4 years. So those kind of things are like sort of the nature of the job in music. So Michael, do you want to tell us a little bit about what drove you to become a teacher?
The best way I can describe it was I was heading down the path of becoming a pro drummer, and quickly become aware that living a lifestyle off of a pro salary in Canada wasn't great for my family and what we were hoping to achieve as a unit. And I I was able to sort of reflect on what I wanted to do and think about what I was good at. And I knew that I wanted to continue playing music and interact with other people playing music frequently. I realized that I spoke pretty well in front of a group, and realized that I wanted to kind of move into that. And yeah, kind of how I got into teaching. Yeah.
Awesome. I like that tie of like, oh, I'm also good at public speaking. I still want to be in music, and those things like feed into that particular career. We're all about sort of like talking about like skills and transferable skills and the stuff that music does and the stuff you need for music that aren't necessarily just practicing 4 hours a day.
Of course.
Don't do that unless you know how to do that healthily, because that's not safe. Cool. Shauna, what about you?
Well, I got into music because music is what kind of got me. My music program in high school got me through high school, and we had had some incredible educators that I was lucky enough to work with. So I thought, I want to do this. I want this to be the rest of my life. So I went to Western, and as I studied music education and I got exposed to different music departments and different students, I thought, wait a minute, this isn't what I experienced in my high school. And I thought, maybe this isn't what I want to do as a career. To which my father was like, yes, you can go into business. So I worked at IBM, made my father happy for a couple of years, and then met my partner at the time, who had a tiny little recording studio in his basement, and we decided let's grow this thing. And so we grew it into a nice size studio, and that was awesome. And then yeah, so I kept music in my life. And then when I met my now husband, he had the music school already, or he had a store and a school. And then we moved from the city out to the burbs, like many people do when they get married. And we thought, wait a minute, there's no music school in our neighborhood. So how do we add some income to our lives? And so we opened up another couple of schools out here in Halton. And since we've shrunk down to one in Halton and the store and school in Toronto. And so, yeah, just music started off important and stayed important. It just kind of morphed into a couple of different jobs, I guess.
Yeah, it's that sort of like, oh, this is like, I'm still doing it, but I've moved out of like doing the music part and finding ways to be part of that community that aren't necessarily like, I'm going to play this one instrument my entire life, which is always, I think sometimes people don't think about that in terms of like music jobs. Like, well, you got to play all the time. That's a music job, but there's so many sort of variations, which is why we're here. Ryan, tell us a little bit about what sort of motivated you to want to, work in camps and like in education, and also like, play drums a ton at the same time.
I'm kind of similar to Michael. I was looking when I got into university to do like professional orchestra sort of stuff. And I went hard at it for a couple of years. And then honestly, when COVID hit, like all of a sudden I had this realization of I don't really want to practice excerpts for 9 hours a day for the rest of my life, So from there, I kind of just decided maybe teaching was more the way to go. And the reason for that was because for probably the last 7 years during the summer, I've been between a camp counselor or a director. And I just always enjoyed being around kids and helping them out and that sort of stuff. So adding music and that together was really just what made sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those two sort of interests going like, oh, I can do these at the same time. That's awesome. That's so cool. So my sort of follow-up question to that is, tell us if you can sort of describe, maybe Ryan, for you, think about like camp specifically, but could you sort of describe like a typical day in your like work life, sort of just like day to day, like what's the experience of like going into work every day, talking, the things that you are sort of part of your day-to-day life that maybe people don't think about all the time?
I'll run down sort of a typical day for me. I run concert band rehearsals and intermediate wind rehearsals in the morning. So I have my students meet me at my school about 7:15 in the morning on those days, which means I need to get to the school just about before 7 o'clock. So that's kind of when my day starts. Meet my kids there about 7:15. Rehearsal starts at 7:30. We do a full band rehearsal on both of those days until about 8:50, and then our day starts. I have planned at my school that we have a morning musician where kids that I teach get to showcase an instrument that they either practice outside of school or practice in my class. It's been something that's been really taken off in our school. Our principal has really taken kind of a role in fostering that, where he's trying to get it to be streamed in all the classrooms so that kids can see it and be a part of it, and that it can be a true feature. So my beginning of the day, especially on a band day, is pretty hectic, where band ends and it's kind of like, okay, now I got to get my morning musician figured out. And then I set into teaching 6 periods of instrumental music, with 1 period of that being a prep. But one thing I can say as a music teacher, you don't plan, you hear of all this like prep time, and you got a lunch and you got a break and you get this, but all of that is taken up with extracurriculars. If in my mind, I kind of do the teaching so that I can do all the extracurriculars. That's what the part of my job that I really enjoy doing. So I run an instrumental drop-in session during my first sort of lunch break, where kids are free to come for their entire recess to come and practice. I do that for not only just to get kids playing their instruments, but it's clear that the music room is a safe space for a lot of kids. Recess can be a very tricky time. They can come and rock out if they need to, or they can work on their scales and work on their etudes if they need to too. So that's first break every day but one throughout the week, and then my second break is typically a duty of some kind, where I am supervising students, which is just a part of my union job that I need to do. And then typical nights, varying the year, I'd either fall into a musical rehearsal or a choir practice of some kind in the evening. Yeah, and then in my own personal, just to kind of tie into like what Ryan has said already, I do try to keep my own sort of music life alive personally. So I play in a couple of big bands locally in the GTA. So typically it's home, eat a quick dinner, and then off to either a rehearsal or a gig of some kind for my own fulfillment. So yeah, it's a typical day for me.
Nice. That's a long day, but it sounds like it's really packed with a lot of really interesting things that sort of like sound motivating in the sense like, oh, this is really cool. Especially the musician thing in the morning. That's so cool. I wish I had that in middle school. I would have annoyed everybody with very squeaky clarinet. That would have been my day to day today. Shauna, what about you?
Michael, you win on the busy factor. But yeah, running the music school and the store. My husband handles the store and the school in Toronto. So, but which as I watch him, I know that with the store, there's a lot of there's scheduling, there's inventory, there's ordering, there's selling, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on with the store. I help with the school here in Oakville, and my day, I'm still a mom, so yeah, my work day is not as full, but my role is to run the studio here, and that involves helping students and their parents sign up for lessons, manage their times once they have their lessons, once they're booked into lessons, making sure they know what's going on, and that they know how, they know what's going on when managing teachers and schedules and frontline, and just kind of being the liaison between everyone, making sure everyone's on the same page, and troubleshooting and answering calls and emails and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of those are my responsibilities with the school here in Oakville.
It sounds like there's a lot of like face to face with like both the kids and their parents, and trying to like balance that, like making sure everyone's on the same page kind of thing. Yeah, and our school runs from around like late afternoon to kind of early evening. So we have frontline that kind of runs it, but I'm there often and enough to make sure everything is going okay. We have an awesome team, so I don't have to be as hands-on and as kind of and in everyone's faces. The teachers are amazing. They do their job amazingly, and our front lines, a bunch of competent young ladies. And so, yeah, everything runs smoothly, which I guess it's good that I don't have a lot of troubleshooting to do, but when there is anything that needs sorting out, then I'm there, and just making sure we're a community school. So it's important to us that they have a sense of community, and that people, we're making sure people are loving their experience, because otherwise they're not going to love music and continue to have it in their lives going forward. So. That's awesome. I like that sort of like managing that community being part of like what you're thinking about on a day-to-day basis, because that's a really important part of music, and I know it's part of what motivated me into doing that kind of stuff. Ryan, what about you? Can you describe, what's your typical day leading up to camp, at camp? I mean, camp, it's like, I'm sure it's just go, 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 and
Yeah.
yell, yell, yell.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, okay. So leading up to camp is basically trying to make sure that you have everybody on the same page, which is really tough when there's a lot of people involved in making things happen. So that's between like marketing, making sure parents know when stuff is happening, when they have to, maybe pay by or send us questions so that we can answer them before they come. We have to make sure schedules get sent out. We have to make sure the programming gets done so that our staff kind of know what they're supposed to be doing when they're there. We have to get volunteers. We also have to get, I guess they're just guests basically, but they'll come in and run, say like a workshop or a clinic or something. And then for our senior campers, we have basically a band, like a small concert band. So we'll need to get a conductor to help run rehearsals and, kind of shape what needs to happen throughout the week. But that's all kind of the boring stuff, to be honest. The camp day is what's fun. And we'll get there pretty early and we'll just make sure that everything's set up and ready to go before parents come. When the kids get dropped off, we do like a big hurrah, dance party, make sure everyone's good. And then we'll start. I worked a lot with the juniors this year because apparently I'm the only one with the patience to do so. But for the first couple hours, basically, we'd run individual sessions with, like bucket drumming or whatever. There's a couple examples, but that's fine. And then they'll eat lunch. Same thing in the afternoon sort of thing. Maybe go run around a bit, burn some energy so that they're not, getting bored. And then we'll come back in, we'll do a dance party and we'll do like a big hoorah at the end of the day. And that basically gets repeated every day of the week until Friday. And then Friday at the end of the day, instead, we'll do like a huge concert for the parents so that everyone gets to perform something. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's also very much like, there's a lot of like, I need to talk to all the people who need to know what's happening at camp. And then at camp, I need to be constantly talking to all the people that are actually coming to camp and sort of like managing those, like interfacing with those people. I feel like a lot of music jobs, and mine included, end up being a lot of, on some level, interfacing with people, whether it's other people who work with you or the people you're like working with. I think there's a lot of like face-to-face stuff that I don't know. I think music is pretty good at preparing you for it, in terms of like having to play in front of people. So my sort of question for you guys, sort of specific, is there something that you learned through doing music and being a part of music that helps you with the non-musical parts of your job? So like, is there like a skill or like something you're like, man, music really helped me do this, and then that helps in the bits that you're not, when you're not doing music, or the stuff that helps you prep for doing music, that kind of thing. Michael, do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, I think before going into teaching, spending some time sort of in the pro world, scheduling and like time management was big then. Kind of that was a transferable skill into teaching, in that there's always something that needs to be done. As a pro, you're looking at different gigs and keeping things booked that way, or there's always something to practice or rehearse, or there's somewhere that you need to be, someone you need to talk to, and there's auditions that you need to go for. And it can be a pretty quiet time if you want it to be quiet, but if you're working at it and doing it, it's a busy scheduled sort of life, which transferred into teaching pretty well, as in that's a scheduled life as well, and just scheduled different things. I think that's the best thing I can say. Yeah, is just scheduling and time management.
For sure. I think even for me, that started with like just trying to make sure every day I had time to practice and prep to like audition for university. That was like a huge part of like, that's sort of like a seed that definitely helped later down the line. I'm not great at it, but it like helped. It makes up for the practice, made up for the fact that I'm not intrinsically good at it. Shauna, what about you?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think back to ensemble playing and to practicing in particular. I think practicing has taught me accountability and sticking to something. And I mean, when we talk to our students, when they come in for their first lesson at the studio, I always, and every week when I'm there, because I try and be there often, I'll ask every kid that comes in, did you practice this week? And you get that, like, some of them look like, oh my God. But I said, you're not going to get better if you don't practice. You can't come, your lesson is not where you grow. Like, your lessons where you get the information, then you go and you do the hard work in between your lessons. So for me, like, it's that accountability piece where if you don't practice, you can show up at a rehearsal, or like you guys who are gigging musicians, and if you haven't done your work, you're going to let the team down. And that's the other thing, is a collaborative piece. When you're on a team, in an orchestra or in a band, you got to work with others, and it's not just work with others, like be cooperative and bring your A game, but it's also like the magic of music, not to be incredibly cheesy, is when you're like, and I think my favorite moments in my musical life is playing in an orchestra with other musicians and with a conductor, and it's just that magic of you're hearing everything going on around you, and it's that soup of that musical soup of collaboration. I don't know how to put it differently, but you're not just sitting there and you're sitting in your bedroom practicing, and you're getting better and you're honing your art. But for me, the magic happens when I'm in a group and I've done my work and I'm bringing my game, and then we're making music together. I think that's the magic, and it goes for running a business. It goes for dealing with customers. Like if I don't listen to you when you're telling me what you need from me as a business person, then I'm not going to be able to give you what you need. So that's, I guess, the collaboration piece, and the, working together, and I got to listen to you, you got to listen to me. We're a team, just like any orchestra is a team. Now I'm going on a tangent, so I'll cut it off there. But yeah, there's a lot of these things I've learned in my musical life that translate into business and into life in general, really.
Definitely. I think especially even tying that like accountability to like the team building part, like you will realize practicing is part of also being accountable to the people you're now working with. It's like, if I turn up not practiced, I've just ruined everybody's day on a little bit. It's made everybody's life harder, and it's sort of a thing that you learn is like, I matter. Like I need to be there and like stand up for that. So I really like those two like things, and I think those are the sort of things you don't think about when you're practicing, because you're like staring and playing a scale for 25 minutes. But I'm like, but when like there's this sort of these things that help you like grow into sort of being able to work with people. On the note of people, Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I would probably say a little bit of both of what's already been said, which is responsibility and organization, definitely. Although if you ask my university professor, he would tell you otherwise. But definitely that has gotten a lot better in the ability to schedule out my days and figure out what needs to get done when. And then I guess also taking accountability for that. But then collaboration, absolutely. This summer working just on the camp whole situation and like trying to make that happen, individual parts were working. And then when we actually got to camp, working with the team to make it all like be successful with the kids was just like awesome. So I definitely agree with that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's definitely true that like there's a sort of intrinsic community team thing that happens a lot of time in music. Michael, you talked about the music room being kind of like a safe space for people to feel comfortable in. And I think that kind of ties into also not just making kids feel like they're part of the community, but also ties into them understanding what it means to be like working with other people and responsible to other people. And I think that's really, really like a valuable thing. So the other, as like you've done a lot of like these different sort of very varied careers, and I just want to know like two sides of the same coin, but what's sort of like the most exciting part of your job and what's the most challenging part of your job? Sort of the two spectrums of like, this is awesome, this is hard. Those two kind of like ends. Michael, what are your thoughts?
This is awesome. I think for me, teaching 6, 7, and 8 and getting kids started on instruments and finally seeing that like I'm getting it, I'm starting to make a good sound, I'm starting to make a good tone, I'm starting to want to do this. This after COVID, especially that hit differently this year, getting kids on instruments. And we had our first band rehearsal a couple of weeks ago, and I had 93 kids show up to concert band just because they want to be a part of band. And it's hard not to get emotional with something like that. It just shows that kids want this in their lives so much, and when we are robbed of it in this kind of way, and what we've gone through, it really shows that this is more than just a subject. It's a way of life, and it's necessary in all ways. I think that's the best part of my job, in that I get to facilitate that for these kids. You know, I get to stand back and watch it happen, although it takes a lot of work. You know, when I have 93 kids showing up at 7:30 in the morning, it's hard not to get kind of excited and emotional about that. So that's the best part. I mean, I guess the hardest part, or the worst part of it, is just, you know, kind of going back to what I said before, the time management. It can easily rule your life. And I think I would say, if I'm speaking to people wanting to go into a career like this, you got to really love it, because you're gonna spend a lot of time doing it, which is great, but you got to be ready for that.
For sure. I think that's sort of like, especially in like arts careers, people are like, well, you do it because you love it. It's like, yes, but if I do it all the time, I'm going to not love it. And that's going to make it so much harder.
And I think the expectation of that too, like the expectations on you that, well, you did this last year, or this happened, or, you know, in education, oh, well, there was a musical last year. Are you doing another one this year? Well, like, am I going to give up my Saturdays every, you know, it can slowly take over your life quickly. Yeah. So, but which is great if you love it, but
yeah, setting boundaries is always an important part of, I think, every career. And if there's one thing I wish they taught us in careers class, it was setting boundaries. But then again, doing that at like a evening working at a movie theater, maybe not helpful as much. Shauna, what about you? What's sort of the most exciting bit? What's the most challenging bit?
The positives for me are the people. I'm a people person. So being at the studio when people are coming for their lessons, and talking to the parents and talking to the kids and getting them excited, and seeing the joy when they improve, that's the best part of the job. And I think the other best part, and my husband will agree, are the recitals, is at the end of a session, or at the end of when the kids come up and they play their song, and for a group of people, and seeing the pride on their, and how excited they're, and how the families like see their progress, how they can measure their progress. So I think those are definitely the positives. The challenges I find is communicating the same things over and over, is when you can't help a customer, you can't give them what they want. So like someone was talking about boundaries. So we have policies, we've developed these policies, as I say, for over 30 years. We're doing this for a while. So the policies we have in place, they're changing and they're growing, but they work for the teachers, for our school, to keep us in business. We have to have, and we're a good place to teach at and to take lessons at. But there's times when you just can't make every client happy in every situation. And I'm a bit of a pleaser. So when I can't say yes to people, and I can't say yes all the time, that makes me uncomfortable. But as you guys know, the boundaries are part of being successful in a lot of areas of your life. So that boundary piece, as I'm getting older, I'm getting better at, but it's still, it's not my favorite part of the job. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, when we have to kind of say, sorry, I really want to make this work, but it just can't. And again, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's my least favorite part of the job, I think.
No, for sure. It's hard to say no generally, especially when you're trying, you're motivated because it's your job, but also like you want to do things that are like good and helpful and be positive, create a positive experience for people. And that can be difficult, but I do think, but you're right. Like the boundaries are very like important, and being aware of that in yourself and going like, okay, I know I'm going to not like this, but I got to do it, or else the dominoes effect is going to create a lot more problems down the line and make it worse for everyone on either end. So yeah, that's definitely tough, but also the joy, as like I teach music privately, and I have videos because I've been doing virtual recitals through COVID, because I have students who, are still online and still want to be online. And I have this whole setup to do that. So I make them as accommodating as possible for both systems. But it's amazing to watch ones from last year and then watch the one I'm like setting up during the week and go, wow, they're so much better. Yeah, it's super cool. Ryan, what about you? Most exciting bit, most challenging bit?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be pretty similar here. The most exciting bit is definitely having students come back and be like significantly better than they were even just like the week after. As a drummer, and I'm hope Michael understands this, but having a student come in and play the Purdy Shuffle after like a year of playing drums, it's like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. The worst part, I mean, it's probably just like having the students not be maybe as accountable at the beginning, especially the younger ones. Like you can tell when they come back and they didn't practice or they haven't even thought about it since the last lesson. And when that happens consistently for a long period of time, that is definitely probably the roughest part, because I don't want to turn around and be like, why? What are you doing? You know, but I want to be nice to them. Like I want to make sure that they want to do this and do all this stuff, but at the same time, it's frustrating for me because it's like, okay, what are we going to do for another 30 minutes now? You know? So yeah, I would say that's probably about it.
Yeah, no, and that's like challenging on a logistical level of like, how do I talk to this kid and get them to practice as they describe to me how busy their week is, and my brain is just going, you're 8. And you feel very busy, but I promise, and it's sort of like trying to translate it and going, okay, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, but also I know you have time to play piano for 15 minutes, unless your parent has you in the most extracurriculars, which is possible. Music kids are very involved, but it's a challenging like conversation, and it's definitely like a tricky thing to like navigate, especially, you know, trying to explain to the younger the child is, the harder it can be to like, you know, translate that. And that's like a challenge. Working with kids is a whole experience, as literally everyone here knows. It's definitely a big thing that you're not prepared for, even if you think you're prepared for it. There's always surprises. The thing that I always think about as I'm sort of like doing the job I'm doing now versus like what I wanted to be when I was 18, which is now further away than I'd like to admit. But there's the thing I think about is like, what do I wish I'd known, or what things I wish people had communicated to me about pursuing a career in music, either the career in or just the career generally, and what I wish I'd known already when I was in high school prepping to be part of this like industry and get into this sort of like field. So do you guys have any advice for people pursuing music, or just things you wish you'd known kind of coming up into like the career that you have now?
Specifically for a music teacher, I wish I had followed through on continuing with piano. I know that's like, my parents put me both in drum lessons and piano lessons, and it came down to a point where you had to pick one. And I went drum route, which was great. It took me a lot of great places and to a lot of great schools, and I met a lot of great people. But now running ensembles and choirs and things, and I am competent at playing piano, but not to the point where I wish I could have been. And I wish could go back and say like, stick with it, keep doing it. And yeah, that's a regret of mine for sure. I also think if I was to speak to my younger self, I would tell myself then that performance isn't the only option. I felt like when I went to a music specific high school where it was very performance based, which was great. And then again, a very performance based degree program and diploma program. And it was performance, which I love. But that there are kind of like what we're talking about here, there are other avenues in the music world, and I think that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's why I'm so glad to have you all here. Is that's definitely something for me that took a long time, and I didn't even want to do performance, but my brain, I still didn't have like a full breadth as I was like in the middle of a degree going, I don't know half the job that exists in music, and every day I feel like I find out another thing I could have prepared myself and done. To do. And that's sort of like a thing that I think gets missed sometimes in the way like music is taught, especially because we're sort of presenting ourselves and there's a lot of like working towards stabilizing the arts and making it an important part of people's lives. And sometimes we forget about also talking about the expansion outside of the stuff we can show people, which is the performance stuff. Shauna, what about you? Things you would tell your younger self?
Yeah, I think I would tell my younger self, like I tell my kids, that your career path, it's more than guaranteed it's not going to be a straight path. It's going to be a lot of zigging and zagging. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Because I remember growing up, you think you have to pick a career and then you have to get educated to do that career. And then that's how it works. But I've lived, as you have heard briefly, and as I watch others around me in their careers, a straight career path doesn't exist. I don't think very often. It's pretty rare. So don't worry if you end up zigging when you think you should be zagging, as long as you're learning and you've got some balance in your life and you're growing, and then keep doing what you're doing and follow your gut, because it's usually, in my opinion and from my experience, it's usually telling you what you should be doing.
For sure. I think even in the earliest parts of like my being in music as a career, so many people zigged and went into a different thing or shifted priorities from whatever they'd done in school. Even people who've gone to grad school just like switch tacks afterwards. Like there's a whole being comfortable with the fact that it's going to be different than you expect, I think, is a big part of working in a job generally, but also especially in the art, in the music, where there's so many things you can do and so many things you'll stumble into and discoveries you'll make sort of along the way. Ryan, what about you?
It's going to be another combination here, but basically being out of university for about a year now, I definitely would have just said, you need to chill out, because like going in, it was like very much like what Shauna said, like you need to get educated, you need to go into the degree, you need to get money, you need to, be able to put yourself in a house in 5 years. And it's like, just relax, just stop. None of that is helpful. Especially not to your mental health when you're going through the education process. So I would have said relax, and then I also would have kind of said the same thing as like Michael, which is just think about it more. Like you don't need to go straight into performance. That's not the only thing out there. Maybe even just learn what else is out there before you pick a path. Like you don't need to, have it all sorted by tomorrow kind of thing. So yeah.
That's definitely like, I think that's a good sum of like what we've talked about, is that like there's so many things you can do, and being open-minded to that and letting yourself take the pressure off of like things are going to happen that I can't predict. No one knows the future except for that one fortune teller I met that one time. But anyway, but that's sort of like, it's sort of always going to be a little bit of an adventure, and that's sort of, I think, the cool thing about a lot of careers like this, but also like the scary thing about diving into this is because you're never quite sure where you're going to land. The last kind of thing, well, I've got two more questions. The first one is, can you take a second to think, but I kind of want to know some career highlights, some things where you went, yeah, I really, really am glad that I get to do this. Like moments that were just like, yes, that is why I'm here. Really love it.
I think mine would have to be a few years ago, I got to conduct the final Halton Music Showcase, and I was able to run the intermediate showcase ensemble. We got to play at, they rent out Hamilton Place Theatre, First Ontario Concert Hall. And you get the best players of all of Halton. You get to play really hard music for that age group. And just to stand up there and conduct that, it's a force. And just to stand in front of that, even for myself at a young point in my career, to have students of my own to make that ensemble, it was not only an honor, but to sit back and say, holy cow, like this is what's out there. This is what kids are able to do. And I'm somehow this very small part of making it all happen. Yeah, I left that night really thinking like, yeah, you know what? I'm not performing every day myself, but there's a lot of performing I am doing through little vessels that are planted in orchestras that I help conduct and run. Yeah, that was a really cool experience. I think another one, now that I've taught for a couple of years, hearing about kids that have gone on to continue music and either continue music professionally, or I've had some students start YouTube channels and they've got all kinds of followers and views, and just to think, I was somehow this small part of setting that off to go and make a difference in the world. I think that's a pretty cool thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that sort of seeing the impact that you have without like going like, oh, that was me, but being like, I was a part of that journey is like a super cool part of like teaching in general. But I really love those examples. What about you, Sean?
I guess there's a few that come to mind. When I was running the studio with my ex-partner, I think sitting at a mixing board, mixing down a CD, or like I still remember those moments and think I enjoyed that piece of that, the engineering piece of that job. That was pretty cool. And then recently, it wasn't a career thing, but I got to play trombone in an orchestra that my kids were both in, because a friend of mine was conducting and they didn't have any trombones. And he asked me and I was like, are you crazy? But anyways, I said yes. And I did it. And just sitting, playing a concert beside my daughter on trumpet and my son on percussion behind me, and one of my most respected conductors in the world conducting us, that was kind of a surreal experience in itself. And then I guess with the music school, just like the other day I walked in, it was the middle of the day and we didn't have any lessons going, but it's in the plaza near our house and it's just in a little tiny space. And opening the, I don't even know why this kind of, I remember it, but I opened the door, I was doing something and I was by myself and I opened the door, I turned the alarm off and I kind of paused for a moment and I just kind of looked around and I thought, you know what, we've created this cool space in our community with people that we love and respect all around us, as a place where people can come and to learn and love music. And I don't know, I had a, maybe I'm getting old and I'm having more of these moments, but I'm like, it's pretty cool. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Especially like you said it wasn't a career highlight, but I feel like the playing trombone in the same ensemble as your children. But there's also that sort of like, and Michael, you talked about it, is like making sure you have music in your life, even if it's not your career, but like that's outside of that. It doesn't have to go away just because you're not doing it for your job. And I think that's something that maybe, again, with the performance thing and the focus that like a lot of music programs have had, it sometimes we escape that. It's like you can just join a community band. We'll practice on like Sunday night or something, and you can just do it all year. You don't have to be like in the TSO. So those are kind of like things that I really like highlighted. Also, the idea of building a community around like music is always super cool. I have a degree in community music. I might be biased, but it's super really, it's one of my favorite things to hear about. Ryan, what about you? Things that stick out in the last few years?
One of them would be just being at Laurier and performing. The one situation that we were in was over the pandemic. We were going to record a marimba quartet that there was a bunch of us. We were all really good friends and we were really excited to play it. And it wasn't terribly good. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't terribly good. We recorded it. We got, a couple good takes and it was fine. And then the next year came around and we decided we're going to do concerts again. So obviously my professor was like, hey, you're doing the quartet. And we were like, oh no. So, but then went out, we did it, and it was awesome. It was like 100 times better than it was the year before. And it was so cool that we got to go out and do it again for the first time in front of everybody. So that would be that one. And then for teaching, this actually did happen in the last couple of weeks. I teach at Burlington Teen Tour. So I'm kind of teaching a little bit of marching stuff with students individually. And I've listened to some of the juniors play stuff, and I've kind of been like in the lessons like, oh boy, we got a ways to go here, And so I've had a few of those lessons, and for the first time I went to a rehearsal with the whole marching band, and I listened to them play, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked, because I was like, none of you do this in lessons. None of you do it. Why? How can you do it now? I don't understand. So it's really cool to just see that dynamic and how even they work differently as a group versus when it's just them. So
that's super cool, especially like that. Like it's so different, and it's the same when you like do a recital, like you're talking about, John. It's like they do something in lessons and then they do the recital. Like, how did you that? Okay, you got it. You just like put your hands up. It's like, I don't know why not being just in front of me made it better, but it did. And it's that sort of like cool, weird thing about like being in front of an audience or just being around people that like you can have music sort of grow like that. So the last question we have is a question we ask literally everybody who comes on What's Your Forte, our interview series, anybody who comes in front of us and talks to us, because it's the question that we're always most interested in. And this can be specific for you, but also we want to kind of know your thoughts generally. But like for you guys, why is music education important?
Well, speaking specifically about myself, going through school, it was my thing. I struggled in a lot of other subjects going through school, and it kept going to music class and going to concert band and being in the choirs just kept me coming to school. And I kind of what I provide for my students to try to give them that safe space is what I was looking for. It's where I excelled. It's where I felt comfortable, and where I felt I had a friendship or a friend group, and I got along. My teachers and I got along really well, and I think music education specifically for students that were like me, that they need it because they don't have anything else. They don't have the sports team, or they don't have the dance recital, or this is their thing that they love, and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Especially the bit about like making a place for like people. I think that's something that I think all of us have kind of talked about in, like in our own experiences with music. And so I think it's a really important bit that I think deserves bringing up every time that people talk about this. Shauna, what about you?
I think it's important, back to the other question you asked, there's so many skills that it builds and so many opportunities it provides. And I don't know whether you're making music or whether you're a beginner, whether you're a professional, or whether you're just someone who, can hum and sing along to the radio in your car. Music's everywhere, and it just brings joy and happiness and sadness. It brings all the feelings. It helps us, I don't know, makes us human, in my opinion. And I just think it's so important that, again, whether it's music appreciation you're learning, or how to play an instrument, or how to master an instrument, I just think there's nothing like it in the world.
I love that bit about like it being like necessary, that sort of thing of like it's part of you, and it's part of all of us, even if I have to listen to a million TikTok songs that sound the exact same every 3 weeks. Ryan, what about you? Why is music education important?
I feel like I'm repeating everyone every time. I got the same ones again. For me, going through high school, this is similar to Michael, but like I was decent at a few things, and I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. I played a couple sports, but I was like, no, I'm not going into sports. So I didn't really know. And then, Brian Vincent came along and was like, you should probably be a percussionist. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. So I think just people like him, that's who make it for us. And I think that's pretty necessary for people that just are confused about what life is supposed to be like after high school. And then similarly to Shauna, I would say teaching students and everyone really just transferable skills, and making sure that you're really getting the benefits out of everything that you can do, and making sure your life's in order, really, in the end. So yeah, that's probably about it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I love that sort of like it being having that person that goes like, no, you can do this. And that's something that I always found like I know my life would be completely different if I had a different high school music teacher. And I'm lucky enough to like still have a relationship with him, and like have like talk to him and see him on like a semi-regular basis. And it's like those people are really important, even if like they don't always register it, but it's always like it's so cool, and being able to be part of that community and feel like you have a place. And also on the other side, be learning things that go into other parts of your life in that sort of transferable skill sense. Those things, as a sum, I think are really important parts of growing up that I think music helps provide. And I love that how you've all sort of like touched on those kind of things. So that's the end of our Cultural Days panel. Thank you all so much, Michael, Shauna, and Ryan, for coming on and talking about your careers. It's been great to like hear from you and learn from you, and also sort of see decent spectrum of like the different kind of things you can do in music and music education, sort of specifically. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If you have any questions that you'd like to know about Bandologist programming, or the band camp Brian talked about, or chaos music, send us a message, and we will. We're always here to help teachers and students learn more, and we have tons of resources on our website. Thank you again for participating. Thank you for watching, and have a great afternoon.